The great John Lithgow is nominated for a Tony for his performance in the play Giant. It's a true story of children's author Roald Dahl and the scandal that marred his legacy. Giant also up for Best New Play.
Giant is such a fantastic play. It seems like a lot. It's like a lot to do every night to live with this man, Roald Dahl.
It's huge. It's a huge role with a gigantic range of emotion. And as the evening goes on, it gets more and more demanding.
Sure does.
So basically, I perform a volcanic explosion. So I have to monitor myself.
Bring me back to the original seed for what this play then became. What was the first thing that made you want to write this?
Yeah, I was way back in 2018. I'm a theatre director, and I was just like, as a Jew, I was like British Jew, I was looking at sort of what was beginning to come out of the Labour Party in our country. There was the beginnings of an inquiry into anti-Semitism. There was the beginnings of sort of becoming aware, and the public becoming aware that seemed to be a lot of conversation around Israel-Palestine, which was very meaningful, and then some of that conversation was also seemed to be blurring into more some anti-Semitic stereotyping. And I just thought it would be interesting for someone, a writer, maybe, to prize apart the difference between those two things, to try and find a dramatic form for that. I knew it couldn't be the news story. I needed to find some proxy. And I remembered, having grown up loving Roald Dahl's writing, that he had been accused of anti-Semitism, and I just looked up what that was. And I read this book review that he wrote, and it seemed to me to be in some way a kind of perfect mirror of what was happening in that moment politically. And I thought, that's a good idea for a play. Like, famous writer at home, under siege, there was this big outcry around what he wrote, and lots of kind of rich detail that I thought it would be good for a writer to try and take on. Little did I know I would end up writing it myself.
And this is your first play?
Yeah.
What an amazing first play to have this kind of trajectory.
Yeah.
What has surprised you along the way and the way it's been embraced?
I mean, the whole thing is beyond, and just this quite complex, hopefully very thought-provoking, hopefully thrilling, but also uncomfortable play seems to have been really, I think almost more than anything, is the amount of people that have come to see it. I mean, it is just the kind of appetite that audiences seem to have for this kind of experience right now has blown our minds.
And it's so fascinating because, Roald Dahl is sort of a name and a character we've heard of. We know his writing. I didn't know much about his personal life. I didn't know about this period in his life specific. What's it been like learning so much about him?
I knew a little bit of his background.
Yeah.
A very good friend of mine, an actress, Maria Tucci, whom I worked with many times 30, 40 years ago. She is the widow of Robert Gottlieb, who was the Alfred Knopf editor, who fired Roald Dahl for being insufferable to everyone he worked with. And Maria was an extraordinary resource because she knew him well. She knew his wit and his charm. She knew how much he cared for and loved children, and deeply believed in bringing children to reading and what reading meant to them and their development. All those good things, she knew them. But she also saw his cruelty and his bigotry and his kind of, the brutal way he could use his wit. All these were simply fascinating bits of information that I just sort of gathered together in playing the part.